This is Elizabeth Smart, and she got kidnapped by a guy who literally thought he was Jesus. Now let me explain. Elizabeth Smart had a great life. She had a great family and lived in a big house in Salt Lake City, Utah. June 5th, 2002. Elizabeth, 14, and her sister Mary Catherine, 9, were sleeping. And in the middle of the night, Elizabeth woke up to a strange man standing over her with a sharp weapon to her neck. And he said,
"Get out of bed, don't make a sound or I kill your entire family."
She didn't want to scare her sister, so she complied. He takes her and he forces her to hike a mountain where he had a campsite waiting for her. This is when Elizabeth realizes that she knows the person who kidnapped her. Brian Mitchell. Brian was a homeless man who thought he was the chosen one by God. Elizabeth's family wanted to help him out, so they offered him some work. Anyways, it turns out Mary Catherine was awake during the kidnap, so she runs and tells her parents, and then they report it to the police. Mary Catherine tells the police she recognized the voice, but she couldn't remember who it was. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is hiking up this mountain to the campsite and Brian's wife, Wanda. So then Brian goes up to Elizabeth and performs this weird marriage ritual and then tells her she is now his wife, and then sadly proceeds to essay her. So then he ties Elizabeth to a tree, barely giving her any food or water. This whole time, Wanda was extremely jealous of Elizabeth because she was getting more attention than her. 49 days go by, and Brian tells Elizabeth he plans on kidnapping her 14-year-old cousin and making her his wife. He attempted this, but he luckily got stopped. But Brian got away. The families believed this was connected to Elizabeth's kidnapping, but the police ignored it. A few months later, Brian and Wanda agreed to take Elizabeth down to the city to help beg for money, as long as she was disguised. A lot of people recognized Elizabeth and reported it to the police, but again, the police were useless. Months go by and the police finally decide to look into people that work for the Smart family. And they look into Brian and see that he has a criminal record. But they ignored it and blamed a totally innocent man, a local handyman, Richard Reese. They were so fixated on this man, but they had no evidence. This continues until Richard dies of a brain hemorrhage. The police were convinced Richard not only kidnapped Elizabeth, but killed her, even though they had no evidence or a body. And they tried to close the case when Richard died, but they didn't. And one day, Mary Catherine, Elizabeth's sister, was laying down in bed and suddenly remembers it was Brian's voice the night of the kidnapping. This was reported to the police, but the police refused to release Brian's name or photographs to the public. They finally did, and Elizabeth Smart was found 9 months after the kidnapping. Subscribe for more.